Hello, everybody. Welcome back to an episode of Red Dead Redemption Character Analysis. And look, so it's been a little while, like 2 weeks since the last character analysis I did for Red Dead. So, I'm not necessarily saying I'm gonna drag it out. It's a big series. I have so much characters planned because right now we're on the Red Dead One characters. So, obviously, some Red Dead One characters share, in tandem with they're also in Red Dead Two. So, we have the rest of the Red Dead One characters to go, and all the characters specifically in Red Dead 2. So it's going to be a big round of character analysis. So it's going to take a long time. So if I seem like I'm dragging the character analysis out by not doing it on a given week, that's basically what I'm doing. If it makes sense, it will make sense eventually. But it's good stuff. So I promise it's all worth it. It's a big character analysis for Red Dead because there is so many characters that I do want to do, and there's so many characters that that are important to the story and whatnot that are important to do. So, but that's just what's going on. Hopefully, it all makes sense. Definitely going to be more consistent with it. However, 2 weeks at a time or so is when character analysis is going to be rolling out. But hopefully, it all makes sense to you guys. But without further ado, I present today's character analysis, which is Javier Escuella. Which Javier, he's also very, he was in Dutch's gang. He's also a very important character. Um, Again, he's one of the characters that played a bigger role in Red Dead 2, more or less, than Red Dead 1. So, seeing the gameplay right now, this is him in Red Dead 1. That's how he looked in Red Dead 1 and not. He is somebody that you see in Red Dead 1. It's like you do one mission, John has to go and hunt him down and whatnot, which we'll get into in the from the Red Dead wiki. But not too much of a big character, just in general. But he is also very important because he's just a part of Dutch's gang, like I said. So he's a decently important character, but he doesn't have a lot of screen time. So it's not too much of a background for him, but he is very interesting. So we're gonna dive right into it. Like I said earlier, getting it from the Red Dead Wiki, like always. So in his background, Javier Escuela was born in Nueva Paraiso, Mexico. I hope I pronounced all that right. Javier's father was a drunkard who worked as a laborer on land owned by Allende's uncle. When he was a boy, Escuela witnessed his uncle and four other men castrated and fed to pigs. Because they suggested villagers demand fair wage, especially Javier becoming a notorious bounty hunter and revolutionary, fighting against what he saw as a corrupt system. He ended up killing a powerful former military man in Punta Arugula. Sorry, I'm not really good with not really good with the some of the names in here, so I apologize for that. But over a woman he was in love with, fearing that his loved ones would suffer if he remained in Mexico, Javier fled to America. However, he could not speak any English and ultimately became feeble and starved, I should say. In 1895, while attempting to steal some chickens, Javier came across Dutch Vanderlyn. Doing the same, they both laughed, and Dutch fed and clothed Javier, offering him a spot in the Vanderlyn gang. Escuela felt an immediate affinity with the gang and his ideals. He became to see the gang as his family and his true home. While especially idolizing Dutch as a revolutionary paragon and becoming fiercely loyal to him, Javier functioned as a gunman for the gang and was involved in a number of robbery and various other crimes across the frontier. One notable example is a bank robbery in Tucson, Arizona, where Javier robbed with Arthur and Karen. At some point, Escuela heard that his other mother had died and his sister had married. Despite deeply missing them both, he could go back to Mexico because he'd most likely be killed if he was discovered. Sometime prior to 1899, Javier and Arthur attempted to rob a stagecoach after receiving tips from a crooked lawman in Reno, Nevada. However, they decided to let the stagecoach go when they found out that it was full of women and children. To their disappointment, that stagecoach was robbed by the O'Driscoll boys the very next day, who had all of its passengers murdered. By 1899, the gang had fled east and headed up towards the state of West Elizabeth. They had been camping outside of the town of Blackwater when Dutch caught wind of a boat carrying an immense amount of money. The gang attempted to rob the boat, but the heist went wrong with Pinkerton's agent showed up. Javier witnessed Dutch murder a young woman named Hattie McCourt, which is actually mentioned in Red Dead 1, during that one stranger mission, and participated in the huge gun fight that ensued. The gang subsequently made a desperate escape to the north, ending up in the snowy mountains of Ambrino. And we're getting into the events of Red Dead Redemption 2 in the Coulter chapter. During a snowstorm, the gang takes shelter in the abandoned mining town of Coulter in Grizzly's West. The next day, Abigail asks Arthur to look for John, so Hosea sends Javier to ride out with Arthur to find him. After a long search, the duo eventually find John badly wounded and realize that he was attacked by wolves. Javier carries John and puts him on the back of his horse before he and Arthur ride back to camp and fight off the remaining wolves. Later, the gang learns that the O'Driscolls are camped nearby. Javier is paired with Lenny during the assault on their camp, slaying several O'Driscolls. During the assault on the Cornwall train, Javier attempts to jump aboard the moving train but misses and falls to the ground injured. He soon recovers and is seen among the others after the train has been incapacitated. During the gang's escape from the mountains, Javier is seen with Charles in the caravan ahead with Arthur and Hosea. When the latter's wheel comes off, this is actually a really funny part when the wheel comes off. Javier offers to help mend it. Although Arthur and Hosea decline upon arrival, Javier is seen at the entrance to the camp, and Arthur lets him jump on as he drives in the caravan into the gang's new spot. And I don't know why, that was just a really funny part of the game. But moving on to the Horseshoe Overlook chapter, not long after moving into Horseshoe Overlook, Javier is in the saloon in Valentine when the brawl breaks out. He is seen punching Tommy in the face, but is overpowered by him and saved when he gets attacked by Arthur. Later, he takes part in the mission to help rescue Sean along with Arthur, Charles, and Trelawney. Along with Arthur and Trelawney, he assaults the camp front on while Charles takes a vantage point over the enemy but bounty hunters. Trelawney distracts two bounty hunters, which allows Arthur and Javier to silently take them down. He then leaves, allowing Arthur and Javier to engage the rest of them in combat. Then the pair eventually join up with Charles, and the three clear out the remaining bounty hunters. Ultimately, the mission results in Sean being rescued. At some point within this chapter, Javier can also rob the whole homestead of Ches Porter with Arthur, which is just an optional mission, which is actually a creepy optional mission, I should say. That mission gets super creepy. But in the Clemens Point chapter, the player can choose to go fishing with Javier, again another choice thing, during this chapter where he and Arthur share a friendly conversation. Later, Javier, John, and Arthur make a deal with the Greys in which they will steal the Braithwaite's prize horses and sell them for $5,000. The three of them talk their way into the grounds before killing the stable hand and stealing the horses. Javier leads the horses during the escape until the trio sell them for a meager $700. Later on, Javier takes part in the assault on the Braithwaite Manor. And moving on to the Saint Denis chapter, Javier plays the part of a security guard during the riverboat robbery. After Arthur wins a Reutlinger pocket watch from Desmond Blythe in the poker game, Javier escorts Arthur and the overseer upstairs to the vault. As soon as Arthur goes to collect his prize, Javier holds the man at gunpoint, and as soon as he opens the vault, which he and Arthur empty quickly. After the man pulls a concealed gun on them, Arthur is forced to shoot them, which alerts the ship's guards. And after a brief shootout, Arthur, Strauss, and Trelawney are forced to flee the ship by jumping overboard and swimming to shore. After getting to safety, they divide the significant amount of money between themselves. Later, Javier also participates in the Saint Denis bank robbery, where he is given a job of guarding the side entrance of the bank. However, the robbery quickly goes wrong due to the arrival of Pinkertons, and resulting in the deaths of Lenny and Hosea. Javier made the gang escape across the city's rooftops and temporarily find refuge in the abandoned apartment. Afterwards, the gang make their way to the docks and board a ship destined for the South Pacific. Moving to the Guarma chapter, after the boat of Saint Denis sinks, Javier, Dutch, and Bill and Micah wash up on the shore of Guarma. Not long after, Arthur finds them, but he and the rest of the gang are soon arrested by the Guarman soldiers. After Hercule Fontaine opens fire on the enemy soldiers, Arthur manages to unlock their handcuffs and make it to their escape. However, Javier is shot in the leg while trying to flee and is captured by the enemy. Escuella is taken to the Asadolces prison. I'm sorry if I, once again, pronounced that wrong. Some of the stuff I just don't know how to pronounce. It's just tough stuff. I mean, if you read this on the Red Dead Wiki, it's tough words there. Anywho's, where Dutch and Arthur see him being dragged on the road by a donkey, surrounded by Colonel Fusar and his men. They interrogate Javier on information for who his fellow gang members are and beat him up. But he refuses to divulge any information to them. Javier is then locked up by a cage until Dutch and Arthur break him out, creating a distraction. They bring Escuella to the safety of the rebels and his fellow gang members, where he is left to heal for the rest of his time on Guarma. Javier's time is spent recovering. And then skipping ahead to the Beaver Hollow chapter, which is just how the wiki went, by the way. With the gang on the verge of collapse at Beaver Hollow, Javier takes a fairly minimal role in gang affairs. He remains unattendingly loyal to Dutch, and his relationships with Arthur and John notably deteriorate as well. Javier does, however, take part in the assault on the Cornwall refinery, in which he joins the gang and the Wapiti Indians in the battle against the U.S. Army soldiers led by Colonel Favors. Javier is also present during the final train robbery, where he is seen accompanying Dutch, Micah, and Joe, going back for John after he was shot. However, the four men later return without John, with Dutch and Micah falsely claiming that he had died. Later, of course, the standoff at Beaver Hollow ensues, where Arthur and Micah draw guns on each other at camp. Javier appears when it is ongoing and announces that the Pinkertons are coming, but unwittingly causes the death of Susan Grimshaw in the process as Micah shoots her while she is distracted by this. Dutch then pulls out his revolver and demands who is with him and who is betraying him, causing Javier to hesitantly join the majority of his gang on Dutch and Micah's side. After the Pinkertons begin their assault, Javier presumably flees with Bill, as neither of them are seen pursuing Arthur and John. And actually, during this cutscene, when they're doing the standoff and the Pinkertons are coming, it's kind of like an Easter egg, if you will, because that I certainly didn't notice it on my first playthrough, but after watching some videos and actually people pointed it out to me. So while everybody else, like Micah, Dutch, and even Bill, pointed their guns straight at Arthur and John, Javier didn't fully point his gun at Arthur and John. He kind of like raised it in the air, and not really. He was kind of hesitant about it, and the reason why I mentioned that is kind of like at that point in the game and time in the gang, he's even then he's not 100% there. He doesn't want to betray Arthur and John either. I think that just tells a lot of poetry in the story. So I think it's really interesting. It's something you really got to look for. You won't notice it in your first playthrough, obviously. Like I said, I didn't. But when it's actually pointed out to you and you pay attention to it, it's just a nice little thing. Pays attention to the poetry of the game. So, and during the epilogue, when John is doing farm stuff and whatnot, after the dismemberment of the gang, Javier returns to Mexico, and he is reported to be living in the mountains in Mexico by 1907. And the events of Red Dead Redemption, which again you're watching the gameplay of Javier, how he looked in 1907 in Red Dead 1. So by 1911, Javier works as a hitman for Colonel Allende, which actually he is a very important character in Red Dead 1. We're going to be getting to him after, very shortly after we do some other characters. And he's the governor of Nuevo Periso and an aide to General Sanchez. Through his association with the colonel, Javier was put under the Mexican Army's protection prior to the assault on Fort Mercer. Javier also helped Bill Williamson escape to Nuevo Periso, which resulted in Williamson also being placed under Allende's protection. When John Marston arrives in Mexico in the pursuit of Williamson and Escuella, per the Bureau's request, Allende takes advantage of the situation, using Marston to aid him in fighting the rebels led by Abraham Reyes, which again, might do Reyes, not sure. He is actually very important, so most likely you're going to do Abraham Reyes on the further side of the Red Dead 1 story. So in return for finding Javier for him, but with no intention of fulfilling his side of the bargain, eventually John is betrayed and nearly killed by the Mexican army, so then he sides with the rebels. Reyes promises to find the two men for John and eventually finds out that Javier is in El Presidio. Javier is located on John during the rebels' assault on the fort. In El Presidio, John holds Javier at gunpoint in a room with the fort. Javier is surprised to see John working for the U.S. government, but John points out that both of them, quote, simply work for different governments, quote. Which actually obviously makes sense because he technically works for the Mexican government. Javier does. So Javier laughs at this and tries to convince John to let him go. John is quick to remind him of how the gang left him to die and says to Javier, quote, it's either you or me, and the way I see it, it might as well be you. Is what John says. Which actually, just this scene in general is actually very important and one of the biggest cutscenes Javier was in, probably one of the only ones too. So this doesn't faze Javier at all, and he continues and tries to coax a deal out of John, claiming that he'll give him Bill and claiming to know the location of Dutch, who is allegedly in Colombia. And as John is left unconvinced, Javier suddenly pushes a crate onto John, who falls over. Javier then leaps out a window and John runs after him. Depending on how the player decides to deal with Escuella, two outcomes can occur, and we're going to go over them here. So if you kill Escuella, if the player chooses this, John retrieves Javier's corpse and puts it in a jail cell back in the fort because he has to show it to Edgar Ross and Archer Fordham as proof. But before walking out of the jail cell, though, John looks at his old friend lying dead on the floor and spits on his corpse with a tear in his eye. Later on, John takes Javier's lifeless body to the government agents. Fordham will sarcastically remark about Javier, saying he's not looking very healthy, which is what he quoted, before John dumps Javier's dead body on the back of their car. The last sight of Javier is his corpse being driven away. And if you capture Escuella alive, John can capture Escuella by using a lasso to subdue him and then ride back to El Presidio's jail. John takes a struggling Escuella to the jail cell where Javier insults John, calling him a puto, which is bitch in Spanish, and tells him that one day I promise you're going to regret this, to which John replies, one day is about all you got left. The next morning, John takes her spraying Javier to the government agents, and Javier spits on his arm. He is taken to America and put into custody, and is not seen for the rest of the game. Later in the story, it is mentioned, John, that Javier is deceased in conversation with Abigail, heavily implying that Javier was later executed, probably by the government. And that's pretty much it for Javier Escuella. Now I am actually going to read a little bit of some stuff, some post stuff. Javier would die fighting for what he believed in, and he had a lot of passion but no love. That's a little bit of his personality, and a little bit of his appearance. And I'm not sure if we go over this in all the character analysis, but it's there. So in 1899, Javier is a slim-built man with black hair and dark complexion, notably having a mustache that is shaved in the middle, with a prominent scar on his eyebrow. Often hidden by his hair, Javier also has a scar in front of his neck, though he never reveals how he got it. According to John, Javier is approximately 5'8". He generally wears a white shirt with a red tie, a silver waistcoat, a blue jacket, and a bowler hat, complete with black trousers and boots, which is modified by a poncho and gloves when in the cold. He is also seen in Chapter 2. He will sometimes, instead of be seen by a long gray coat, a sombrero, and a bandolier over his waistcoat. While in hotter temperatures, Javier wears a dark blue waistcoat over his shirt without his usual blue jacket. For the Saint Denis bank robbery, Javier wears a smart white shirt, a black tie, and a silver waistcoat, which is mostly covered by a long, smart black jacket. On Guam, our set attire regresses to a shirt and a waistcoat only, along with black trousers. By 1911, as you guys can actually see in this gameplay here, he has changed somewhat since 1899. His face is lined and wrinkled with some additional scarring. In addition to appearing somewhat thinner, in stark contrast to his sharp, clean looks in 1899, the 1911 Javier appears to have poor hygiene. His now medium-length hair appears unstyled, exposing his prominent eyebrow scar. He also changed his attire. Instead of wearing a beige-colored jacket with a white shirt underneath, a bandolier, and a sombrero, which are more suitable for the desert climate, which, again, you can see what he's wearing here in this gameplay. So I like that ties in. And by the way, also with the gameplay, I'm probably going to, at least for Red Dead 1 characters, I'm probably just going to use the same formula for gameplay for, like I said, with the Red Dead multiplayer, which actually works out really good because you can pick whatever character you want. But, and all said and done, that's Javier Escuela's character analysis. Javier isn't my top favorite characters. He plays a big enough role to the point where it's worth doing a character analysis, because I'm not going to do a character analysis on every character, of course, in Red Dead 1 and 2, because there's just too many. So I only really choose the more interesting characters that I like, or the more important characters, and Javier, I think, qualifies for being an important character. He's one of the gang members John had to hunt down in Red Dead 1, of course, and he's also plays a decently big role in Red Dead 2. You see him a lot more, and you can do some fun stuff with him. So he's just one of the members of the Vanderlyn gang that are, with ties to Red Dead 1 and whatnot. So very important character, in my opinion. So, but, he doesn't get enough screen time, and in my opinion, he should probably get more screen time. He's kind of a misunderstood character by most, if I had to describe it. But he's good. He's a good character, if I had to say. But just not enough screen time. And most people would agree with that. But yeah, that'll pretty much do it for today's Red Dead Redemption character analysis. Like I said, just to clear up more of what I said earlier towards the beginning of this video, I'll probably doing character analysis every 2 weeks. That's kind of the schedule, maybe 2 weeks or so. Just because I'm trying to stretch it out, because it's such a long series. At least for Red Dead, such a long, round of character analysis that I really just kind of want to stretch it out, make it last a little bit, in terms of, the character analysis. So, it's to the benefit of you guys, and, at least how I think, will be to the benefit. So, that's pretty much how it's going to be with character analysis, but make sure to drop a like on this video if you enjoyed it. Comment down below what you guys are thinking of Red Dead character analysis. Also, comment down below what you guys think of Javier Escuella. Good character, bad character, whatever. You don't like him. Do you think he got enough screen time, or he needs more? Comment down below. Let's discuss. But that being said, make sure to subscribe for more content. Link in the video, Discord, Twitch, Instagram. Links in the description. I'll see you guys in the next video.